Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are diving into one of the most talked about, yet I think deeply misunderstood movements in online self-improvement, NoFap.
Right. And it's centered on this really rigorous idea of abstinence. We're talking no pornography, no masturbation, and sometimes no orgasm at all. PMO, as they call it.
And not just for a week. We're talking 30 days, sometimes years.
The participants call themselves Fapstronauts, which is, a name. But their core goal is really about recovery. They see it as an addiction to the kind of high-intensity internet porn that's just everywhere. They're looking for self-control.
So our mission in this deep dive is to take this huge stack of material. Well, we've got these viral anecdotal reports detailing what they call superpowers.
Genuinely incredible claims.
And contrast that with the cold scientific analysis. Neurological changes, clinical definitions like compulsive sexual behavior disorder or CSBD from the ICD-11, and then some pretty critical studies that flag some, frankly, very serious mental health risks.
And we have to start with the most dramatic claims, right? I mean, the reports from people who go for months, 5 months on hard mode.
And that's a key distinction for you to understand. Hard mode means zero ejaculation. At all, not even without porn.
Exactly. And when they hit these long streaks, the reports stop being about just recovery. They become about transformation.
It really makes you wonder, are these actual physiological changes happening because of abstinence, or are we looking at what might be the world's most powerful, life-altering placebo effect?
That's the billion-dollar question.
So let's start with those promises, the anecdotal superpowers. I mean, just reading one 5-month report, it feels like a manual for a total life makeover.
It's not subtle, is it? The claims cover everything: physical appearance, mental sharpness, even how they perceive their social status.
On the physical side, this glow-up, as they call it, is apparently real. They talk about better skin, pimples just gone, clearer, brighter eyes.
They describe them as looking more beautiful. It's not about better vision, it's about vitality, I guess.
Right. And nicer hair, straighter posture. People claim it's easier to gain muscle, that they need way less sleep to feel rested. Some even report their voice getting slightly deeper, more authoritative.
The thing about the physical claims is, for the most part, science doesn't really show a direct causal link from just abstinence. But the mental and social shifts they report, those are incredibly compelling.
This is where it gets really interesting. They describe their mind becoming super clear, like a radio that's finally been tuned in, all the static is gone.
And vivid dreams, even lucid dreams, become a regular thing. Their comfort zones supposedly expand massively. Concentration goes through the roof.
And the big one, a huge improvement in self-control, not just with sexual urges, but in all areas of life.
And that links directly to the social advantages they claim. They say they stop needing external validation. They start to, thrive in social settings. They talk about developing a killer instinct.
That's the language they use. Transforming from what they'd call a beta male into an alpha, someone who just naturally takes charge.
That alpha language is definitely provocative, isn't it? If the goal is self-mastery, why does it so often pivot to social dominance?
That's a great question, and it's where you see skepticism, even inside the forums themselves. You'll see other users calling it delusions of grandeur.
Or dismissing the most out-there claims. Things like general attraction, getting more attention from women, but also, weirdly, from children and animals.
Yeah, and feeling super lucky or operating on higher vibrations. That's where even fellow members start calling it placebo.
But if we strip away that quasi-spiritual language, what's the real engine here? What's driving these changes?
It has to be psychological momentum, channeled energy.
I think so. The supporters argue that, look, maybe better skin isn't a direct result of not masturbating, but it's an indirect result of all the motivation and, frankly, excess energy you gain.
And then you channel that energy into, what? The gym, a better diet.
Exactly. Consistent exercise, healthier food, reading, learning new skills. The discipline you build in this one very difficult area just starts fueling discipline in everything else.
So abstinence isn't the magic. It's the key that unlocks the discipline. It's the tool.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so that leads us right into the science. If it's a tool, what's it fixing in the brain? This is where it gets really fascinating. The core argument is all about the brain's reward system. It's all about dopamine.
Absolutely. The whole hypothesis rests on this idea of pornography being a form of hyperstimulation. It just floods your reward circuit with dopamine.
And anytime you flood a system like that, it's going to compensate, right? It's going to pull back.
Precisely. The brain adapts by downregulating. It either reduces the number of dopamine receptors or makes them less sensitive. Clinically, this is why everyday pleasures, a walk, a good conversation, can start to feel dulled.
Your baseline for pleasure gets artificially jacked up.
Exactly. The brain now expects this massive instant hit, which can lead people to seek out more novel or more extreme content just to feel the same level of arousal.
So what does this actually do to the structure of the brain? Is there a physical change that connects this to something like, say, a substance addiction?
There's significant neurological evidence, yeah. Studies have shown changes in brain structure, specifically reduced gray matter volume in key parts of the reward loop, like the striatum.
And the striatum is?
It's central to habit formation, motivation, goal-directed behavior. When you see reduced gray matter there, it mirrors the structural changes we observe in substance use disorders, like cocaine addiction.
That comparison to cocaine addiction is pretty stark. So the theory is that abstinence lets the brain, heal? It lets that gray matter regrow and reset its sensitivity.
That's the idea. The goal is to allow the brain to regain natural sensitivity, to move the reward needle from hyperstimulation back to a balanced, sustainable level where normal life feels rewarding again.
Okay, let's circle back to one of the biggest physical claims then. Testosterone. Is there a permanent hormone boost that's fueling this physical glow-up?
This is a really crucial point where the science offers a very specific reality check. The idea comes from a 2003 study on healthy men. And it did find a remarkable spike, a 145% spike in testosterone. But, and this is a huge but, it happened specifically on the 7th day of abstinence.
145% spike is enormous. But if it's just on day 7, why are guys on, say, day 90 still talking about sustained energy?
Because the study also showed those levels normalized pretty quickly after that day 7 spike. The takeaway is pretty clear. There's a significant short-term hormonal lift that might give you that initial burst of energy and motivation, but it is not a sustained long-term effect.
So the motivation someone feels month in has to be coming from somewhere else.
It has to be. It's being refueled by the disciplined lifestyle changes they've adopted, not by some endless testosterone boost.
So if someone reports 6 months of easier muscle gain, that's not the hormones. It's the fact that they're actually going to the gym consistently and eating better because they've built that discipline.
Exactly. The initial surge might kickstart the engine, but the long-term changes are driven by behavior. It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
Okay, so moving from the self-help science to the clinical reality, we have to talk about how the medical world sees this.
Right. And there's formal clinical recognition for this kind of uncontrollable sexual behavior. It's called compulsive sexual behavior disorder, or CSBD. And in the ICD-11 system, it's classified as an impulse control disorder.
An impulse control disorder, not an addiction specifically. That implies a very particular pattern of behavior. So what's the clinical line? Where does a high sex drive become an actual disorder?
The definition requires a persistent pattern. We're talking at least 6 months of failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses. But here's the key. The behavior has to cause marked distress or significant impairment in your life.
So it's not just about the behavior itself, it's about the consequences.
Yes, it means you're neglecting your job, your family, you've tried to stop or cut back, and you just can't. And you keep doing it even when there are serious negative consequences.
That seems like it could still overlap with people who just feel a lot of guilt about sex, maybe for cultural or religious reasons. How do clinicians separate that from genuine impairment?
That is the most crucial, nuanced part of the diagnosis. The ICD-11 is extremely specific here. It says that distress that is entirely related to moral judgments or cultural disapproval. That is not enough to meet the criteria.
Okay. So a clinician has to show that the person's life is actually failing. They're losing jobs, relationships are collapsing, maybe they're having legal issues.
Precisely. It provides that necessary clinical distance from just moralizing a high-frequency behavior. And in a clinical setting, CSBD almost never travels alone. The comorbidity rates are really high. It often co-occurs with mood disorders, especially depression and anxiety.
What about substance use? I imagine that's a big one.
It's very common. Alcohol abuse is highly prevalent. Cocaine is also common, and also behaviors like chemsex, using drugs to enhance sexual experiences, which just multiplies the health risks.
And I saw a link with ADHD.
Significant one. Up to 27% of men seeking treatment for CSB also report ADHD symptoms. It suggests underlying issues with things like executive function, attention, and impulse regulation are at the core of the problem.
So if a patient meets all these criteria, what does treatment actually look like?
The foundation is psychotherapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is the main approach. Pharmacological treatments are used, but they're all off-label because there aren't any drugs specifically approved for CSBD.
Off-label, so what are they using and why?
Often SSRIs, which are standard antidepressants. But in this context, they're used to help decrease overall sexual desire and impulse strength. More interestingly, sometimes they use naltrexone.
Wait, naltrexone, isn't that used for alcohol and opioid addiction? Why would an opioid blocker help with a behavioral issue?
It connects the process addiction model to the substance addiction model. The thinking is that naltrexone interferes with that pleasurable reward, the opioid dopamine link, that the brain gets from the compulsive behavior. By blocking that high, it reduces the reinforcing power of the urge.
But the research on this is still new.
Very new. The research levels supporting these drug treatments, specifically for CSBD, is still considered pretty low.
So if the clinical path is still developing, it makes sense why the self-help path emphasizes this radical self-discipline. It's really the most positive force of the whole movement.
Absolutely. The whole philosophy is about choice. Don't be a slave to your desires, be the master of your discipline. Success is framed as choosing what you want most over what you want right now.
And every time you resist an urge, you're strengthening that mental muscle.
Exactly.
Huh.
It's like a workout for your prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
You're actively retraining your executive function. But discipline isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you don't do. The pitfalls are a huge part of the conversation.
Right, the anti-guide. What are the big traps they warn people about?
First is unrealistic expectations. Seeing this as a magic cure that will fix your whole life overnight. It's a long process. Second is ignoring your triggers: boredom, anxiety, stress. If you don't fix the underlying reason, the behavior is just going to come back.
And what about the substitution trap? I've seen a lot about that.
That is critical. They explicitly warn against just replacing one high-dopamine habit with another. So no endless video games, no binge-watching entire series in a day, no mindless TikTok scrolling.
Because you're just feeding the same dopamine-craving beast, but with different food.
You are. It delays the brain's ability to reset and find satisfaction in normal everyday life.
Okay, so what about the inevitable setback, the relapse? What are the immediate steps they recommend to, as they say, kickstart willpower and stop the shame spiral?
The response is all about immediate physical and cognitive interrupts. First, you clear your browsing history. Then drink cold water or hot tea, no caffeine. And the big one, take a cold shower.
The cold shower. Why is that so central?
That cold shock forces you into deep, controlled breathing. It gives you an immediate psychological reset without any dopamine involved. It just snaps you out of that mental state.
And for the longer-term reset?
The next day is about physical activity. Jogging, a hard workout, guided meditation. But the crucial advice really is to be non-judgmental. Treat a relapse as a learning experience. Figure out your triggers. Don't treat it as a total failure that erases all your progress.
Which is really important because that brings us to the critical view. The potential harms here are significant, especially when the ideology gets rigid and people stop seeking real clinical help.
And the data on the negative mental health effects is genuinely alarming.
Yeah, I saw the findings on suicidal ideation. It's pretty shocking.
It is. A recent survey found that nearly 30% of men in the NoFap community reported having suicidal thoughts after a relapse. And these negative outcomes, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, they seem to get worse with more active participation in the online forums.
Wow. So the community that's supposed to be for support can actually amplify the shame of failure.
It creates this dangerous cycle. You adopt the ideology to feel in control. You fail, which is, human. And then the shame of that failure gets magnified by the community structure, leading to these catastrophic feelings of inadequacy.
And then there's that paradox with sexual function. People start this to fix performance issues like ED, but being in the forum seems to make it worse.
It's a profound paradox. The research shows that men who participated more in the forums actually reported more instances of erectile dysfunction.
How does that even happen?
It's likely fueled by intense self-monitoring, performance anxiety, and the complete moralization of sexual thoughts. Normal arousal can become associated with shame and failure. That fear gets in the way of the body's natural response and makes the original problem even worse.
And this highlights some major blind spots in the research, doesn't it? Especially around demographics.
A huge one. Our entire clinical understanding of CSBD is overwhelmingly based on research into heterosexual men. We just don't have good data on the needs of women or sexually diverse groups who sometimes report the highest rates of these behaviors.
And what about polyaddiction?
That's a huge risk that gets overlooked in the self-help space. CSBD often co-occurs with other impulsive behaviors, like gambling or substance use. If you only treat the sexual impulse with abstinence, the underlying anxiety or lack of impulse control can just transfer to something else.
So your unresolved sexual issues become a trigger for your drinking to get worse.
Exactly. It all has to be treated holistically.
So after all that, what does this mean for you, the listener? We've sort of laid out two competing realities here. On one hand, the NoFap framework can be this incredibly powerful tool for harnessing self-discipline. It connects controlling your impulses to real success in other parts of your life.
But that benefit exists in this really complex space. For some, it might be a genuine path to recovering from a real clinical disorder, CSBD. For others, if it's just driven by cultural guilt and this rigid ideology, it risks over-pathologization. It can make you believe you have a severe disorder just because of moral shame.
And as we saw, that can lead to some really significant mental health risks, especially around relapse and shame.
I think the ultimate takeaway here is that the benefits are most profound when self-control, through something like NoFap, is used as a tool. It's a gateway to building better, healthier habits and addressing real, underlying emotional distress.
It's the starting line, not the finish line. It's not a magic cure that just hands you superpowers.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you to consider. We know people with clinical CSBD often struggle with poor sexual performance, anxiety, and low self-esteem, especially in stable relationships. So if the goal is truly a healthier, more fulfilling life, what does success even look like beyond just abstinence? And how essential is specialized sexual function therapy, which might include prescriptions for ED or premature ejaculation, to fully break that entire cycle of shame, anxiety, and inadequacy that keeps this whole system going?